Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. It's been a long time since we've done a tier list in Genshin Impact. Since then, there have been a ton of new characters as well as Dendro's release. And as always, we have Cyno to help me out with the free-to-play portion of this tier list.
Yo, I'm Cyno. For those of you who don't know, I do like challenge runs. I used to do account reviews. I've done a lot of things, like I did Nuzlocke for Genshin where I 36 starred, the best at AR35, a bunch of stuff like that. And I've done a lot of TC stuff too. Thank you for having me here, Win. I appreciate it.
Yep, and check out Cyno's Twitch at twitch.tv/Cyno. And with that stuff out of the way, we can actually hop into the explanation of the tier list itself and why we have decided to completely start over with a brand new tier list and where we're going to actually replace every single character in the game. But really quick, it's time to pay some bills. And today's sponsor is Atlantica Online. Atlantica Online is a free-to-play MMORPG with a rich tactical combat system available on PC. Explore the massive world of Atlantis, where you'll face otherworldly monsters, get tons of loot, and encounter tons of other players. And coming up, they're adding the new mercenary Natasha. Natasha is an assassin, and driven by her quest for vengeance due to her scar. And if you pre-register with the coupon code on the screen, you'll get $100 worth of items. You also get some epic pre-register milestone rewards that could include Natasha's skill books, a limited edition costume for Natasha, and so much more. But that's not all. There's also a 7-day login bonus where you'll get even more goodies, like a goddess accessory set, gold license pack. It's really the gift that keeps on giving. Smash that link down below, as there's never been a better time to start exploring Atlantis and Atlantica Online than today. Huge thanks to Atlantica Online for sponsoring today's video.
I'll go ahead and take off and go ahead and explain the first tier. We have the Amber tier, the fan favorite, you could say. It's pretty much reserved for exclusively the most questionable choice you can make on your team.
Above the Amber tier is the Special tier. Certain characters are just only good at something extraordinarily specific, and because of that, it's difficult to really place them elsewhere in this tier list. Like, oh, you know, can you really say a character that is only good at buffing a certain thing is good as a general usage character? No, you can't, but you can definitely throw them in the Special tier.
Then we have the B tier. Let's just say it's because every unit can be somewhat functional if we really put your heart to it. You can get these units to work. They actually do have teams.
Above that, we have the A tier. A tier is what I like to describe as fairly balanced, and this is when once you really invest into these characters, they will perform quite well, and they're just reasonable, solid, balanced characters.
And then the next tier is the S tier. So a lot of the units in the S tier can situationally be some of the strongest units in the game.
Generally, S tier characters, they're great. It's hard to go wrong with investing into them if you do commit to them. And last but certainly not the least is the SS tier, which is the cream of the crop, the creme brulee of this tier list. And these are typically what people would call broken or meta-defining characters, but for us, they will just be known as the SS tier characters. It's really hard to go wrong investing into these characters, as either they have so much flexibility or so much power. Alright, so what constitutes a free-to-play tier list? We assume that 5-star characters are at Constellation 0. Maybe here or there we might mention a lower constellation like C1, C2 for a couple characters that have been out for a while. But overall, we're generally judging them at Constellation 0. And newer 4-star characters like Candace, Farazan, etc., a lot of the Samara ones, we're assuming that you have low amounts of constellations on them.
I don't want to interrupt, but I don't know if Farazan wants to get much older. So units that have not been out, or they haven't had like a rerun yet, we won't be rating them based off of C6, but any other 4-star units that have had multiple banners will be rated as C6. So basically though, we decided to redo the entire tier list. Well, Dendro came out in 3.0. and pretty much everything has shifted. So it'd just be easier to make an entire new tier list at this point.
What Dendro really did is that it really raised the floor of free-to-play teams with the introduction of extremely powerful pure reaction-based damage. So you're going to see a lot of shifts to old characters as well as placements of new characters as we dive into this extremely long tier list.
So, kicking it off, we have the Amber tier. The fan favorite, if you will. And in the Amber tier, we have Aloy. She's pretty much been completely neglected. She's not in the story. She'll never get a constellation. And she pretty much has received nothing from Dendro.
For those Aloy mains that are holding on to some hopium, perhaps a Horizon Zero Dawn sequel will bring us the buffs that she desperately needs, but alas, for now, she is completely forgotten. Special tier, let's make this quick, and we're gonna put every single special character in here. Okay, so if we look at these characters, they all have one thing in common. They all buff one very specific thing, and they all buff that thing to Kingdom Come.
Let's talk about Sarah, Faruzan, and Yunjin. They all have ER issues. Yunjin she's situationally a Bennett buff for normal attack carries. She has very high gear requirements.
Yeah, in particular, Faruzan and Sarah, they get massive buffs at Constellation 6, so a lot of their viability is tied behind that. I mean, Goro does too. Heck, all of them actually get huge buffs at Constellation 6 in comparison. So free-to-plays do need to keep that in mind when deciding to use these characters on their teams. Shenhe, of course, being a 5-star one, we're rating her at Constellation 0. But she will be great at Constellation 0 for buffing specific cryo damage situations. But again, very, very specific and special buffer. So we can already move on to the next tier, which is the B tier. And we're going to start this off with our favorite pint-sized genie who slings a bunch of illegal merchandise, Dory.
The thing about Dory is she's kind of clunky to use due to her having like the tether mechanic, which does not really feel that good to play. She needs a ton of ER. She's not really great for Hyper Bloom. She can self-swirl Electro with Jean's Burst.
Yeah, Dory is an extremely unique character, opening up some very strange and hipster playstyles. Like Kono mentioned, we have Jean's self-swirl to proc Aggravate. One combination I like using is Sayu plus Dory, as it's very easy to get that Electro infusion on Sayu and then just roll a bunch of Electro on the enemies. But you can tell that they are either odd and strange like Dory is, or they sound very clunky and difficult to use, which kind of really summarizes Dory quite well. The next character on our list is Candice, and she is also going in the B tier next to Dory.
So the thing about Candice is she does have two teams where she's okay. One of them is where it's a Nilo Bloom team with Yao Yao Nahida. And what you do is you on-field the Yao Yao and you build 1,000 EM, so Yao Yao always takes ownership of the blooms. It's niche, it can work, it's okay. We got Chi Chi next. She heals a ton. If you really want her to get work, you can play Hyper Bloom with her. Because you can play Hyper Bloom with anything, but we'll talk about that later. She carried Zhao.
Okay.
Literally.
If you really want Chi Chi to be good, you just have to go back and watch that cutscene. There she is literally carrying a limited 5-star character on her back. So I think that warrants her fairly high placement in the B tier. Now, the next character is Chongyun. And if you want to use, Chongyun... oh my gosh, poor Xiao. Okay, so this is definitely a tangent, but I just want to point out how much MiHoYo abuses Xiao. Just think about all the cutscenes and all the times that we interact with him. He's crippled underground, trapped in a ditch, and we have to go save this guy, this poor lad. Or he's suffering from constant PTSD, or he's literally being carried by a tiny dead child. How much more abuse are we gonna put Xiao through?
I didn't think about it that way, but Imagine having such a rough life that you have to be carried around by somebody who's already dead. Okay, Chongyun.
Chongyun. So, Chongyun, honestly, I think we can go through this pretty quickly, but he really didn't benefit much from Dendro's release, so yeah. Xinyan is next, and we actually, fun fact, we actually had Xinyan in the Amber tier back in the day. MiHoYo has really overcompensated for the lack of Xinyan since her release, and now she continues to be in every single event, you know, doing something with her music, doing something. But sadly, that does not actually make her stronger, unlike Chi-Chi.
I just want to say that Jinyan reminds me of like the people who go through like the drive-through and they just start singing. Like, why are you doing that? She's a pyro-physical DPS focused character. That element doesn't work at all.
So theoretically, she can do some very large burgeon damage numbers, but the issue is you take a single hit, like almost literally, with an EM build, and you will lose her shield. Next character is the Geo Traveler. Sadly, Geo is in a similar state to Physical. It's just gotten no recognition, no love recently.
Then we got Amber. She can be an elegy user for Hu Tao. That's about it.
Okay, we're getting through these lower tiers pretty quick because these characters are, you know, sadly a little bit niche nowadays, so they don't really get too much recognition. Personally, I feel like Electro Traveler is actually one of my least favorite characters from a gameplay and kit design perspective. They made a battery that needs a battery to do any sort of meaningful battering for your team. What were they thinking when it came to designing Electro Traveler? I don't know.
Animal Traveler, literally every other animal character is pretty much better. You can do some niche stuff where you self-infuse with Bennett and then you have like a aura on the enemy and then you can get a double swirl in like 40 frames, but is that worth coming an entire team slot too?
So the next tier, we finally got to the A tier, which we're actually getting to some decent and pretty reasonable, balanced, and good characters. The first one being Heizo. Generally speaking, Anmo is pretty good. Heizo does provide an elemental mastery buff, and he also, you know, actually does some significant damage with his one punch style. And finally, he has a little bit of grouping, but that's kind of the thing about Heizo, is that because the damage floor has been raised so high thanks to Dendro, the amount of damage he does not feel nearly as impactful as, for example, just doing 2 or 3 hyper blooms. And at the same time, he lacks the same grouping and buffing that a lot of other Animo characters provide. The next character is Mona.
Alright, so Mona is still a massive buffer. She's pretty situational. She pretty much is only used in freeze or damage per screenshot. You know, she's still a Hydro unit, even if it's a little bit clunky, so again, bloom reactions.
So the next character is Barbara. Now, Barbara is both a Hydro applicator and a healer, and there happens to be a character that really appreciates that, Nilo, right? However, you know, Nilo now also has better options for that, also having another healer option for her team now. Barbara can drive and she can create cores and she heals all at once, so Hydra is just in a very good place right now thanks to Dendro as a whole.
Alright, so next we have Layla. Her shield's pretty good. Her main use though is to be played in like mono cryo or maybe freeze. I would generally only play her with a Shenhe, especially before C6 because her damage really isn't that good. But mono cryo teams aren't really the meta. They're fine.
I think Layla has kind of taken the spot of overall second best shielder in the game. However, the issue with that is that she is clearly power crept in that role by another character that we clearly haven't gotten to yet. So up next, we have Lisa. And yeah, so Kona's the one that actually placed Lisa around here, so why don't you kick that one off?
Okay. I guess I'm going twice, but So she's good for newer players because you can run her with Fischl, a pretty free-to-play friendly team. It's like you can do Yao Yao, Sucrose, Fischl, Lisa, and you can build 4 TF on her in conjunction with her ultimate and her E being a 1 second cooldown and TF having a 0.8 second cooldown. If you time it correctly, you can get multiple aggravate procs in a second.
Most importantly, when it comes to activating all those aggravates, is that each one activates Fischl's passive. Up next is Razor. Where is our little wolf boy Razor? Our homeless wolf boy. There he is. And he has found himself a home in the A tier. So I did a DPS showdown with Constellation 6 Razor versus C0 Cyno, and the first thing I noticed was that the two of them perform very similarly, which is kind of makes me sad in some ways and not in others. But the point is Razor actually has benefited from Dendro because he can both activate a lot of aggravates, which, as mentioned earlier, activates Fischl a lot, and he can also be a decent Hyperbloom driver with a more EM focused build. Up next we have Jean. There she is. So Jean is an interesting Animo character because Animo is known for providing a lot of buffs to the team. However, Jean actually doesn't really provide a lot of buffs for the team unless you have her Constellation 4 and then you use her with Xiao or whatever, but you know, that's not really for free-to-plays to really consider. Jean's focus was on fall damage, but nowadays fall damage just takes too long for too little gain in comparison to things like Hyperbloom or Virgin. Besides that, she also has a very unique property where she swirls the element off your character, which actually does have some niche uses with things like Dory.
Animo healers don't really have a good place in the meta right now because if you want an Animo unit, there's better options that we'll talk about later.
Okay, so Sayu is fairly highly rated here for a couple of reasons. One is that we actually do consider a little bit of overworld abilities here, and Sayu is just, you know, one of the best characters in the game for that reason. You can catch Crystal Fly, she moves extremely fast, stamina free, etc., and she heals. But she also has one more really fun and unique gimmick. With a pure elemental mastery build, you can infuse her with Electro and hit something that has Quicken applied to it, and along with Fischl, as you know, we've been mentioning Fischl a lot, she will trigger a ton of aggravates, which will trigger a ton of Fischl's second passive. Actually adds up to do a lot of damage. On top of that, Sayu swirls Electro too, right? Shredding the resistances. So it's a surprisingly fun and viable build, but again, you probably just have better options than that.
Okay, so next option, we're just. Do you want to just group the next 3?
They all have the same pros and cons. Yes, I was thinking the exact same thing.
Okay, so we have Yanfei, Klee, and Diluc. They didn't really get a lot from Dendro. I mean, you can technically play them Virgin unless you have a lot of gear for them. It's hard to compete with Virgin. Pyro on-fielders, unless they have very, very high damage, they generally struggle for you to find a reason to actually run them that's worth it.
And we can group these two up too, actually, the next two.
Yeah.
It's Noelle and Ning Guang. So we're just going to go back to the old, what we've been saying. Geo has just been forgotten lately, and well, these two just kind of belong here. They both need big investment to make.
Ningguang especially, you could even argue Ningguang gets placed lower because she's an attack scaling Geo character. And attack scaling Geo characters don't really have anything besides Bennett. Yeah, okay, so the last one is Kaya. Kaya is an OP sub DPS option. You generally have better options, though. For a lot of teams, you can be used for like Fridge Bloom, or like for just generating additional cores for things like Hyper Bloom and Virgin. How many times have we mentioned that?
I think at least once.
At least once. Anyway, so
yeah.
Let's just move on to the next tier.
Yeah, next tier, S tier. So we're gonna kick this one off strong with the Bobaholic Ayato. I would put him in the SS tier because, you know, he has an infinite supply of Boba in his left sleeve.
So Ayato is pretty easy to use. He's very consistent. He applies AoE Hydro. I don't know. I think everyone forgets about this, but he generates his own energy off field. So sometimes he can get away with like 0 ER depending on the team.
Mm-hmm.
He also has like pretty decent damage, nothing too crazy, but it's definitely non-negligible. He doesn't apply such an overwhelming amount of hydro that it drowns out other reactions.
Now, the next character on this list is Child. And one problem with Child on a Dendro team is that if you have two enemies anywhere near each other, he will immediately drown out the Dendro. That being said, though, I mean, International Child is still International Child and is still one of the better/best free-to-play teams out there.
I do want to say this. International Child won't sim well over an extended period of time due to the way his cooldowns work. But because of the way it front loads damage, it has some of the highest potential to just one-shot things.
So up next is Kokomi. Originally ragged and dragged through the mud and called perhaps the worst featured 5-star character ever released. Nowadays, Kokomi has definitely grown on us, and yeah, she's just a great healer and AoE Hydro applicator. Also was really good in freeze teams. She just has the longest off-field AoE Hydro application that doesn't require like a bunch of normal attacks and stuff like that. Up next is Nilo. Nilo gets her spot right next to Kokomi.
Nilo is pretty much the unit you use when you don't want to do anything but level up your characters and throw on a couple mains. All of her team's damage, like 90% of her team's damage actually comes from a mechanic called Bountiful Cores. And so if you run only Hydro and Dendro units, you get access to these cores, and it significantly increases the damage of just raw bloom damage. It's comparable to things like Hyper Bloom and Burgeon.
It's a fun and volatile and suicidal playstyle, and one issue though is that because you can only use Dendro plus Hydro, you do lack a lot of powerful Anemo supports, whether it's Sucrose's EM sharing or just grouping in general. You know, you can't use Venti, for example, so enemies on the side will just walk away, and then you have to run all the way over there to blow them up with a few cores. It's an incredible low investment team that is a lot of fun and a lot of chaos, which makes it even more fun. Up next, we have Arataki Ito, the one and only Oni. Yeah, pretty much just like the other Geo characters that have been on this list. Neglected, but he still does good damage, and he's Unga Bunga, so here he is. Just very straightforward character and placement, and just like he is as an individual.
So, Yao Yao is a character I thought, I'm gonna be honest, I thought she was gonna be bad. I was wrong. She applies pretty decent Dendro application. She's a healer, and she has a pretty easy time getting her ultimate back, and her healing is probably the strongest in the entire game. It's so strong, it can out-heal Nolo Bloom and Rifthound Corrosion at level 40 with an instructor set.
Yeah, good character. Good character. Hard to go wrong with investing into her. Now, the next character on this list is Yoimiya. Yoimiya is actually just a good single target DPS character. You do have to invest a lot into Yoimiya, but once you kind of get your Yoimiya team built, you'll just murder everything pretty easily. There's really not too much else to say. It's a classic Vape style build, and you're not going to be disappointed. Yoimiya is great against a lot of really annoying enemies too, right? Like we're talking specters, things that fly around. She can shoot the Golden Wolf Lord for a long time too. She can shoot robot chickens out of the sky.
Manifestation, Ruined Serpent, all those annoying bosses that they keep putting in the abyss. You're gonna have to beat that out. I'm sorry. Yoimiya's actually really good into that.
Up next, we have the Wanderer or Scaramucci. I did want to start this off by saying Wanderer is totally busted when it comes to overworld exploration.
Wanderer is actually a pretty decent DPS option with this charge attack spam. You can get 14 to 15 off if you animation cancel properly, because he can be played in a lot of different ways. He's got a lot of team comp flexibility, and he can easily use a lot of drivers. He doesn't have energy requirements, and he's animo, which means that if you really want to, you can use him in other various type of teams, like double Hydro with like Eolon, Jingzhou, and you build him VB. He does a lot of teams. Rosaria, Bennett, Zhongli, if you want to play him as a hyper carry and you don't have C6 Farson. Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I also want to mention actually Wanderer has really good and accessible free-to-play builds too. He has the Widsith, which has always been notorious for being a great free-to-play weapon option, and he can use both the Shimenawas as well as that new artifact set. which are, well, at least the Shimenao is an incredible artifact set to farm for your account. So all these things, you know, actually do make Wanderer a pretty decent character overall, in my opinion. The next character is one of the biggest buffs that we have seen in at least our tier list history. It is Thoma.
Thoma is a Thoma went from like a unit who doesn't really do anything, to put it lightly, into you basically built him full EM with Kitane now, and you play him Virgin. His slow application, but quick hits make him really, really good at hitting cores, since you won't override the Dendro aura or Hydro aura, and if you do, like you're going to be able to easily put it out with your Hydro applier. Means that he's the best Virgin applicator in the game. He does have the downside of requiring a lot of gear, like 170 EUR and subsets on your EM gear, and Kitane and C4.
The next character on this list is Dendro Traveler, and I think MiHoYo actually designed Traveler correctly here, unlike her Electro counterpart, which I still have no idea what they were thinking when they made that thing. Dendro Traveler is just a great free Dendro applicator that everyone has access to. She provides modest, although non-negligible buffs throughout her kit and constellations to your team's elemental mastery, as well as, I think, Dendro damage.
C6 does have the corresponding element that it infuses.
And the corresponding element. Next character is Albedo.
Albedo, if somebody's going to cancel me in the comment section, because I can't.
Well, what's his hot take?
He's got solid damage. 30 to 40k off-field ticks if you really push his gear. He's a great flex choice. He can even be used in Dendro teams like Hyper Bloom, because he gives an EM buff. It's like if you need to kill the Golden Wolf Lord, and that'll help you get through the most unfun boss ever in Abyss. I hate Wolf Lord. Please remove it from the game.
Personally, I hope MiHoYo adds all 3 giant annoying snakes into a single Abyss. And then I want them to add like eight of those Husk Knights, and maybe a few of the giant Rifthound Wolves all in one chamber. And I would love that Abyss. I would love to mold over that.
Thank you, Satan. Very cool.
Up next is Kaching, and Kaching, now a solid S tier character in my opinion. Now, Kaching has really grown on me since Dendro's release. She is an incredible aggravate driver, because she just activates a ton of aggravates with her kit. If you have her Constellation 1, it activates an extra aggravate every time you use her elemental skill. And what this means is that when paired with a certain electric bird dispenser, you will get a ton of extra official procs. Kaching can also swap easily, and she has minimal to no energy issues. So she is a very smooth and good feeling aggravate driver with Dendro. Now the next character is Tighnari.
Tighnari is a pretty decent spread damage dealer. He does have the downside of he's not very good at driving things, because he applies too much Dendro too fast. And he's got like awkward field times and rotations that like hold him back, because there's nothing that really synergizes him with him very well besides like Yaimiko. All things considered, he does have very significant personal damage.
Up next we have Xiao. So Xiao is still in the S tier. Now, Xiao still suffers from all the same old problems that he has always suffered from, which is a lack of great supports, and honestly, Constellation Zero Farazan didn't really solve that issue for him. Most free-to-play players nowadays are not going to have Constellation 6 Farazan, which absolutely does buff Xiao tremendously, but since we don't have Constellation 6 or we're not considering Constellation 6 Farazan in this list, Xiao hasn't really moved or improved thanks to Dendro's release. Rosaria, where?
She again, she's good in reverse melt. She buffs crit rate, physical shred, which unfortunately is not very relevant, but you know, we can pretend it is. And she can be used in freeze teams too as an option. She does have a lot of flexibility.
Up next is Cole. Many would argue that Cole is a pretty bad character, and I can see why. I can see why people would say that, but I mean, realistically speaking, you know, she's just a Dendro applicator bot, and she does have some situations where she does indeed apply Dendro a bit better than Dendro Traveler, but for the most part, she's just a little bit worse than Dendro Traveler, which is why she is here. Now, a couple nice things about her is that she is a bow user, so if you do have the elegy, which has perfect synergy with Dendro teams, thanks to the Elemental Mastery it provides. Let's move on to the next character, Beidou.
Beidou has a couple problems that keeps her from fully benefiting from Dendro. Her Q doesn't hit blooms, which can be occasionally a good thing, but generally it isn't. She can be used for normal and charge attack spammers because her Q actually procs on charge attack. So she's okay in aggravate, but Fischl's normally better.
Up next is Diona. So Diona does have some pretty decent roles in Dendro teams, and largely because of her Constellation 6, which provides 200 Elemental Mastery to things inside her Elemental Burst. Honestly, if you don't have Diona's Constellation 6, I would not really consider using her for Dendro teams, but if you do, she is a great buffer for them.
We talked about it a little bit before, but there is a niche interaction with with the way Cryo and Hydro interacts with Dendro, where if you proc freeze, you can react with Dendro to clear the Hydro. You get the Dendro aura on something, and then you proc freeze again, and then you can get additional blooms.
The next character on this list is Eula. Go ahead, Kono. Kono has a lot to say about Eula.
Some of you guys might be salty that I'm rating Eula. This is entirely me. Those of you who don't know, I'm a Eula main. On this whale count, I have a Eula with 280 CV in artifact, with an R5 weapon in C3. And do you want to know what the best team that I have for her is?
Let me guess. I'll take a stab. It's a Cryo DPS with Shenhe and Chongyun.
It's Hyper Bloom. I hate this game. Okay. So my Eula gets outperformed by almost every single team on my free-to-play account, and it drives me insane. Why?
Well, to be fair, Hyperbloom synergizes with Eula thanks to Superconduct. Next character is our favorite trading card game enthusiast, Cyno. Cyno is a character that personally frustrates me. They kind of took a character with a lot of promise and just decided, okay, we're going to tack on all these issues, and here is the character. But regardless, Cyno is still, Electro and scales off Elemental Mastery, so he's a good Hyperbloom driver, and Hyperbloom is just too good for Cyno to honestly be any lower than this, in my opinion. If you know much about Cyno, he has energy issues, he has survivability issues because he has no super armor, he's always interrupted, he has extremely long field times, and he cannot swap. After he swaps, he's completely useless, and he does have higher personal damage than Kaching, and I thought of barely. And I thought of rating Kaching. Oh wait, we did rate Kaching higher than him. Duh. Okay. So yeah, it's because of the lack of flexibility, inability to swap, and all these other myriad of issues, despite his damage being a bit higher than Kaching, that he is down this low. We have wrapped up S tier and below. We have finally made it to the big hitters of this tier list, the SS tier. And we have, we're going to start off with the very best character in this tier list, and it is Hyperbloom. There's just no other way to put it. I mean, this thing will 9-star Abyss for you. That was one issue that we had building this tier list, was that outside of Pyro Catalyst characters like Klee and Yanfei, literally every other character can just run a Hyperbloom team and 9-star Abyss 12, because you need 3 other slots. You can just slot in 3 Hyperbloom related characters, and you could be an S tier character just based purely on the Hyperbloom damage. But, we decided not to go in that direction when it came to building this tier list.
It's basically national on steroids. There's no other way to put it. It's overtuned. Dendro reactions are very overtuned for their floor. I think if the damage was around 20% lower, and then they would be a lot more balanced.
Yeah, and it takes very little investment for you to really maximize your gains from Hyper Bloom. For the SS tier, we're going to go from the bottom of SS tier to the top of the SS tier, unlike the other tiers, just for suspense reasons. So we're going to start off with Xiangling. I mean, Xiangling is still Xiangling, still the gold standard of sub DPS options, no ICD on her Q ticks. However, that type of damage is now achievable in today's meta without a whole bunch of endless farming of the Emblem of Severed Fates artifact set, while she still is an SS tier character just for how much damage she does. And
so the next character is, this might be a surprise to some people, but it's Yaimiko. And the thing about Yaimiko is she has pretty high damage. Like her numbers are not like really that low when you pair it with Aggravate, because her burst doesn't actually have a ICD, and her totems, and she also scales off of EM, and she can proc on field due to being Catalyst. She has like a lot of like potential to like even speedrun on a free-to-play account, much like how Child does, but she has very, very high consistent damage too. Up
next, we have the character that we've been talking about for, I feel like, literally this entire video. It is the Oz Dispenser official. Not to steal Kono's words here, but she's like the, flex tape, duct tape of Electro, and that you can just put her in almost any Dendro team. Very low field time, almost no issues with energy. She's got great build options too, including the Elegy or, her personal damage options like the Stringless, and anything that activates Aggravate and Quicken, or even other kind of side bonus reactions in Dendro teams like Overloaded, will activate Fischl's second passive, which also has no ICD and no cooldown on how often it can activate. What all that means is that she just zaps the enemies with so many Aggravates and Lightning Bolts that it has now bumped her into the SS tier.
She just has a lot of uses. Like, we could make it an entire 1 hour long video just talking about all the teams that Fischl can go in.
Yeah.
And have it not be bad. So the next option is Hu Tao. Some people might disagree with this one. However, Hu Tao still has the highest single target ceiling in the game. Things like Hu Tao Hyper, where you run like Xingqiu, Sucrose, or Kazuha, and then Bennett, or you do like Funerational, where you run double Hydro with Yelan, Xingqiu, Shenling. It's very, very difficult for most teams to compete with that ceiling. Only out of crit scaling units that can actually compete with Hu Tao teams in terms of sustained and front-loaded damage, it's Yai Aggravate and Alhaitham Quick Bloom.
The next character is Ganyu. Now, Kono and I had many disagreements when it came to Ganyu's place. I still think Ganyu is an SS tier character. Ever since her release, she's just been super consistent. She has so many different team comps. She has always been able to 9-star at least one half of pretty much every single Abyss 12 that we have had to date. She has many, many different build options, and with each one having different situations where they're optimal. If you've gotten lucky with the Amos, if you pull for the Hunter's Path or the Aqua Simulacra, all three of these weapons can be used to maximum effect on Ganyu. She's easy to farm for. You have the Wanderers as an option. Shimano is Blizzard Strayer for Freeze teams, Gilded Dreams as well. If you're mostly building Dendro teams, she can absolutely use the Gilded Dreams. She has both easy to use teams that are fairly powerful and consistent, like the Zhongli Melt variation, or a freeze team where you just freeze and lock down enemies. And finally, she now has an access to very large nukes, even for free-to-play players, thanks to the introduction of Nahida. So the next character is Sucrose.
Sucrose is basically the EM counterpart to Kazuha. She actually has a bigger overall buff due to having access to things like Thrilling Tales, Hakushin Ring, but she has less personal damage due to her needing ER subs. and she can be fairly inconsistent due to her C6 infusion, like requiring the element to be directly on top of the C6. She's still extremely strong and situationally the best buffer in the game.
Sucrose did get a nice buff thanks to Dendro, just because she is able to share a ton of elemental mastery, and as we know about Dendro by now, it absolutely loves having a lot of elemental mastery. All right, the next character is Venti. Now, Venti is also another character that Kono and I disagreed on, but and I actually agree with Kono on strongly disagreeing with me here with Venti, whether or not he stays in the SS tier. But I still think the fact that Venti just either completely trivializes and dumpsters whatever he, is good against, still makes him an SS tier character. And there's a lot of situations where Venti will do that for you. On top of that, he's still generally good on one side of most Abyss 12s that we've dealt with, whether or not it's grouping up a bunch of annoying wolves, grouping up some, husk guys. There's usually something that his elemental burst will completely screw over and allow you to destroy. Overall, Venti, while he's not as all oppressive as he was on release, he still is a character that can single-handedly invalidate a lot of the content in this game. Yeah. Okay, next character is Bennett.
Some of you guys might be surprised to see Bennett this low in the SS tier. Shocking.
Yeah. At one point, didn't we rate him as the best character? I think we did.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And I remember on that tier list, we were like, I don't see a world where Bennett is ever lower. I guess this is that timeline. Good. Yeah, it's the biggest attack buff in the game. He heals you. He doesn't need much gear. The reason why he's rated lower is because there's a lot of comps that really don't care about Bennett. Sapwood Blade is a good thing that was released for free-to-play players because it's base 44 with ER substat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great for Bennett. So, I mean, we don't need too much of an explanation for Bennett, but the main thing is that Dendro did not really benefit Bennett much, and that's why he has indeed dropped a bit in this tier list. Now, the next character who might be kind of surprising for a lot of you guys in terms of how high we placed her is Kuki Shinobu. That's right. We have a tier list where Kuki Shinobu is above Bennett. Oh my goodness.
This is definitely one of the timelines.
Oh my, I think we're getting canceled for this one, but
okay, I will be the one to explain this. Okay, so if you think about the damage that a normal free-to-play Xiaoling would do with like a 4-star weapon, it would cap out around 70-75k damage a tick. Kuki Shinobu does that without requiring almost any gear due to the way Hyper Bloom works.
Yeah.
Without requiring any energy recharge, and with the release of units that are very, very reliable on-field Dendro applicators like Alhaitham and Nahida, that just means that her ability to do like damage is significantly up there.
She also heals too, so they're...
Yeah, she heals. So she's like, you combine your Bennett and Xiaoling into a single unit that doesn't need gear.
Yeah, she needs no gear either. It's ridiculous.
You just build full EM main sets. Yeah. She doesn't even need energy recharge.
Nope. Yeah, so I think Kuki is perhaps one of the biggest changes in terms of like how viable and strong a character can be. I've always called it the Kuki syndrome that she had prior to her release and to this day. So it's really incredible to see how far Kuki has come, and one of the best characters in the entire game for a free-to-play player. The next character, who I think I'm a little surprised that we put him this high, but I'm also not that surprised at the same time, but it's Alhaitham, and we're going to put him actually right above Kuki. Alhaitham just does great spread damage. I mean, he activates so many spreads throughout his rotations and kit. He feels very smooth to use in comparison to some other Dendro applicators. And he has some cool fancy techs that actually improve his capabilities with his Q swap capabilities. Like you can use his Q, swap to Kuki, use her E, swap back to Alhaitham in order to catch his mirrors. So all these things just make him not only a strong and fun character, But the fact that he just applies so much Dendro that almost no amount of off-field Hydro can overwhelm his Dendro application, this means that you're only limited by how much Hydro you can apply, for example, in order to spam a bunch of Hyper Blooms. Yeah, right now, Dendro's just really powerful, Spread is really good, and Hyper Bloom is also really good, and Alhaitham does all of this.
He's also good in the low bloom teams.
Yeah, he's just good with everything that's Dendro related, right?
So the next unit is Ayaka. Okay. And while recent abysses haven't really favored Cryo, Ayaka's raw damage is so high that it's like with her burst that it's still worth mentioning, because I don't think there's anyone in the game who has a multiplier as high as she does.
The next character is Zhongli, still in the SS tier. Now, I'm the one that kind of insisted on keeping him here, because I know that Zhongli doesn't sim well and doesn't really increase most teams' DPS by a whole lot, but he is still the invincible button. You press it, you don't have to worry about, pretty much damage. Like, what's that when you have Zhongli? And still universal resistance shred, you guys know him, you guys love him, you probably use him most Abyss cycles. So yeah, he's also great with many new characters. You can always flex slot him in when you don't necessarily need more damage and you just want a nice, easy time. And we've also seen the Abysses have much more aggressive and dangerous mobs, at least this last one, and Zhongli will just trivialize it.
Thank you, Consecrated Beasts. Very cool. I do want to say that I'm less against Zhongli being in the SS tier than before, because Zhongli ended up being better for Dendro than I anticipated. The Dendro teams have such a high floor that you can still get like teams that do like a baseline 80k DPS with like Zhongli in your party, so it doesn't really matter as much. Thank you, Raiden Hyperboom. So the next character on this tier list is Kazuha. Kazuha is still a really, really good unit. He's got very strong crowd control. Some people, if they save for him, might have C2. I don't know how many free-to-play players do, but I mean, if you do, hey, good for you. It is a very accessible constellation, though. He's good with aggravate teams, monocryo. We have like the aggravate teams, especially. The aggravate is the big one because aggravate is like super, super strong. A lot of Dendro teams don't need him, but he can still occasionally be used as a trigger.
Yeah, and of course he's still incredible in classic teams like Child International, Yoimiya Vape. I'm sure there's others that I'm not thinking of. And for me, I always slightly consider overworld value, and Kazuha is just literally one of the best characters in the game for the overworld too. So there's that. All right, so that brings us to the next character, who is the Raiden Shogun. Many people initially thought that Raiden would not actually get a huge buff from Dendro. However, fun jokes on them, because she actually did benefit a lot. Now, of course, classic Raiden builds like Hyper Raiden, Rational, or I guess Raiden National, are still good. If you have Constellation 2 or 3 Raiden, Hyper Raiden is just going to absolutely murder everything. And Raiden National is still the old Raiden National that we have always enjoyed and used. But there is the new use for her, which is the pure EM build. And yeah, Kono, why don't you kick that discussion off?
So those of you who don't like follow any TC or don't know about this, Raiden, this build involves a unique aspect about her E. So her E has a standard ICV, which means that normally it wouldn't be very good for like reactions, but because of the way Dendro cores interact, like basically they are their own separate entity, which means that Raiden being able to proc each one every 0.9 seconds, meaning that she has the fastest with bar some very specific niche exceptions that you don't like. I don't really want to talk about here. Application in the entire game on something that has no energy cost means that you can build pure EM and you're only limited to the amount of cores you can generate. A coordinated attack every 0.9 seconds, which is the limit. You can do baseline 80,000 damage per second with just a full EM Raiden build, which to put that in perspective, that's like a Hu Tao with like 40 subs. That's a lot of damage.
The next character is Nahida. Now, Nahida is the Dendro Archon, and right now we are playing Dendro Core Impact. A really good thing about Nahida is that her E-ticks apply 1.5 units of Dendro, which makes her incredibly unique. And because of that, though, she almost can guarantee Dendro uptime, even with a lot of things like Hydro hitting the Dendro applied enemy, generating a ton of cores. The fact that she does all this off field while also doing a lot of her own damage, while also providing 250 elemental mastery buff to whatever on field character, while also having nearly infinite range on her hold E, while also being able to be played on field and apply even more Dendro, makes her one of the best characters in the game. There's really no other way to put it.
Dendro is overtuned. It's basically Dendro plus Hydro Impact. Everything good revolves around those two.
With a sprinkle of Electro.
Being the most universal flexible unit in the entire game is just like, yeah.
And that leads us to the final two characters on this list, who we'll start with Xingqiu.
I mean, we might as well just talk about them both because like they're basically the same unit. But Xingqiu and Yelan, I don't think anybody should be really surprised that these two units are on there. They have high base damage. Hydro's broken. They do all their damage and application off field consistently. Yelan is better for crit units. Xingqiu is better for reaction based because he applies more due to his like orbital rain sword mechanic. And you pretty much can't go wrong with them.
Yeah, they're not just used in, you know, the Dendro Core Impact playstyle either. They're still insanely good for Hu Tao. They're still really good for Yoimiya Vape, any type of reverse Vape if you do want to use like kind of more classic builds like Diluc. They're good in as a pair for double Hydro situations or even mono Hydro. You can use them in Freeze. I mean, like, anything that involves Hydro, you can literally use these two and they will do extraordinarily well. Now, I personally insisted on putting Yelan above Xingqiu. Yelan is broken for the overworld. Like, she's just literally probably the best character for the overworld in the entire game. And if I were to choose between the two, like I could only choose one, I would choose her solely for that purpose, because when it comes to their Hydro application and damage and all that stuff, they all have slightly different advantages and disadvantages from each other, so I may as well just pick based on that. They are defining the entire game right now, but I would not be surprised, similar to Bennett Impact back in the day, if we do see a shift eventually, but as of right now, we have those two dominating everything, along with Nahida.
Remember a year and a half time when Natlan is released? Pyro Impact again.
Pyro Impact? When are we going to get physical impact? When Dainsleif is playable?
Ecopium. For sure. For sure we'll get it.
And we'll never have had a Geo Impact.
Geo?
Wait, what's that?
Huh?
Oh yeah, wait, I think it's in the game.
Like, honestly, it's probably more interesting to play the game as, like, somebody who has money right now. Because you're not shoehorned into playing the same thing because, like, it just... Yeah, it's like, I'm gonna be honest, it's a little bit boring to play. Yeah. It's like a free-to-play player right now. Whatever your favorite character is, they probably suck compared to Hyperbloom. Unfortunately, like, obviously you can play whatever you want, right?
Yeah, the game's easy enough for that.
Teams.
Yeah.
I've played Shenhe DPS. I've 36 starred with Aloy DPS. You can still do whatever you want. It's just like, if you care at all about like having an easy time in the Abyss, or like you basically are shoehorned into specific things, and it feels pretty bad.
Hyperbloom is not just like one of the top DPS options, it is insanely easy to use too, right? So, and because Hyperbloom's base damage is so high, it almost doesn't matter what the other characters are doing besides activating Hyperbloom. And here is a quick tier list that I threw together for fellow whales that might be curious on my thoughts on where characters are ranked in terms of a whale tier list for mostly speedrunning purposes only. And don't forget to check out Kono's Twitch at twitch.tv/Kono, and I would also greatly appreciate it if you checked out today's sponsors link down below. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.